Quality has been very important, hasn't it, Chris?
That's the hallmark of the whole project, really. It's the academic quality, the output of it.
We've wanted all along to make sure that the research that goes on the website is of the highest quality, not full of myth and legend.
Probably 70% of church guidebooks, if you pick them up, it says the earliest bits of our church are Anglo-Saxon. Well, I'm afraid in most cases they're not. And we have to dispel the rumour, and although it would be nice if they were, we need to get that correct. And it's establishing really what date are the earliest bits of the church, where are they, and why are they that date, and helping people to identify what they really have got.
And we've been very well supported by the university, particularly Professor John Beckett and one or two of his colleagues, in developing that research side and making sure through a very, very careful and thorough editing process that everything that goes on the website is a long-term legacy, and in 100, 200, 300 years' time, people can look back and say, we know that is facts.
And that meant training people in where to look for the material, where the sources were, not necessarily in their church, but maybe in the county archives office, maybe in the local studies library, and trying to get them into the habit of going there and looking for the material. So it was quite a major undertaking. It was important from our perspective that the volunteers should get something from the project, not just be inputting. And so what we were keen to do was to work with them in terms of training, in terms of what to look for in a church, in terms of how to interpret all the things that you see in a church, the stonework or the glass, or find out more about the bells or anything, the masonry, whatever. And that they would come out of it knowing more about how to read a church than they may well have started from.
Which rightly makes all our volunteers feel very proud of the work that they've done for us, because it's been peer reviewed and because we know it's probably, there may be some additions in the future, but it's as complete a picture as we're likely to get at this stage without doing some more primary source research.
I was Professor of Medieval History at Nottingham, and at the moment I was about to retire, John Beckett said to me, would you like to take part in the project that we have on the churches of Southwell? And he proposed that we did our village church, which was Norrell, and I very foolishly said, well, we're a benefice of 4, so we'll do all 4 of them.
I am not a historian at all, but I got swept away by what was going on. And I think probably when we started, the most enjoyable thing was that we were working as a team, because it brought together people from the 4 churches, and we would meet probably once every 2 months or something like that. It was a challenge actually, but the framework that we were given by the project was enormously helpful, because each aspect of it was broken down into a series of categories. As I've mentioned, the windows, but there would also then be the memorials and the stonework. So we knew that there were various aspects that we needed to work on, and there were always specialists available associated with the project. So for example, we had somebody who came out from the British Geological
Survey at
Keyworth, to help us with the stonework, because
yes.
We couldn't tell one stone from another. But we're now really quite experts on Skerry, which a name we hadn't even discovered at all before.
Well, I think it helps you to learn how to see rather than just look and take for granted what you see. It makes you examine what you're looking at. And although I thought I was pretty good at that, you know, having done all these courses and so on, and always been obsessed with churches and so on, I found that, for instance, when I was looking at Horton, I suddenly realised there were things there that I hadn't noticed. And every time I went back, I found something more. And then, for instance, I found a pillar that didn't match any other pillar, and then it obsessed me. Why was this pillar there? Why was that different? And then I found that where the front, the west end had been changed, obviously they had bodge builders because it didn't actually fit, so they had to do little funny things to make it fit on the end, you know. So I don't think I would have noticed those things before, you know, in the same way. So it makes you look, which I think is very good for you, you know.
Unlike archaeology, where you perhaps dig in the ground and each layer you go down, you know, is older and older, with the church, it's all mixed up. So there's a bit of 12th century work here and 20th century work there, and that's, I think, was what I found fascinating. There are in the Beltar wedding cheeses, which are quite rare, and they were put there by the bell ringers to commemorate people's weddings. So they are in a sort of plate type shape, and they have the year of the wedding, and they have the initials of the bride and groom. So that was interesting. My son got married in the church fairly recently, so I'm thinking about perhaps continuing the tradition and having a wedding cheese made for their wedding. I've enjoyed it. It's been time-consuming rather than hard work, because it's been fun to do. And I've learnt an awful lot. Every year the village has a fete, and I do tours of the church, so in that way it gets more people who perhaps would live in Laneham and never go in the church, makes them interested in the church.
Yes. I've lived in the parish that I'm researching all my life. Very familiar with the building, but when I started researching it I realised that I hadn't really looked at what was around me.
No, we don't, do we?
I'd sat in the surroundings, but had I actually looked at what was there? And I now find that I sit and I'm still looking at things rather than, and I'm seeing what I'm looking at. I think before I would look at it, but I wasn't really seeing what I was looking at.
More than anything, it brings to life the fact that the church was built as a community building, and it's nice to think we're all now going back to that and using the churches for things as well as religious services. And I think that it pulls everything together, doesn't it? Sort of where we've all come from and who went before us. So it is enlightening and it is inspiring to see what our predecessors did, isn't it, really?
Appreciating more what's going on at a certain period, so knowing that if in the 1630s they're buying ornaments for the church, that's tied into what's happening with Charles I and William Laud, and knowing that there's this whole context behind it. It's not just they bought a thing to go in the chancel. It's, you know, that was a political statement actually. So knowing that, I think I find that interesting.
Yeah, I enjoy as well putting the pieces of it together like that. As you say, you get, because of course it would be one book that tells you that the book got this ornament, and it could be something else entirely that gives you the context. Exactly. Putting them all together. Yeah. It's probably the biggest part I enjoy about it. Sort of puzzle solving, I guess, in a way.
I've never really had any contact with any churches in my whole life, so so not from my family aren't religious in any way. So I suppose for me, researching this is the first kind of contact I've really had with seeing how a church is in the community, and there's some amazing characters linked to them all through the history. And like I went to Mansfield, to St Peter's and Mansfield, and it was just the church was a really community-based church, and I just thought they had really good connections with the community, and I thought it was interesting. It was good.
Yeah, I think it makes me look at a church in a slightly different way now. When I go, if I'm passing by a church or something, I would look at it now, which I wouldn't have done before.
Yeah, I look at it and go, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder who did that one.
And I guess whereas before I would have seen it as purely, as you said, purely the religious function, and now I sort of see it as a building and as a historical entity which has got a human history to it.
We've had training sessions provided by the project, and that's really given me a knowledge of how to do it. I've learnt an awful lot from this project, not only about the history of the church and the history of the village, but also how to do history research. The knowledge, for example, of Chris Brooke on reading a church, how to look at the stone, how to work the history out from the stone of the church, and generally the way the church was put together over the last 1,000 years. We've now got a trail which was written, an architectural trail which was written for the Open Churches weekend this year, with a map and points of interest around the church.
We're both interested in history, and particularly of the history of the church, because it goes back over 800 years. And we like to interpret it to other people, so that other people can enjoy it in the same way, in depth.
For members of the congregation who sit here every week and have done for year after year, and we point something out to them and they say, "Oh, I've never seen that before. There's a window over there which you can't see and which no one sitting in the church can see, which has really got quite a story behind it and is in itself an attractive example of stained glass, which virtually everybody is unaware of."
It's been on my days off that I've done some of the research around Holy Trinity Southall, which is behind us here. I did a degree in history originally at Nottingham University, so there was kind of a bit of a natural connection, and it's helped me reconnect a bit with that history. The key thing I've learned about this church is the dedication to the glory of God. It's on the bell, it's in several of the windows, and everywhere you look, the phrase "to the glory of God" keeps coming up about Holy Trinity Southall.
I've enjoyed it enormously, amazed myself by what we've actually produced.
I kind of see it as like, if you've never listened to any classical music, all classical music sounds the same, and if you've never sort of thought about a church, then all churches will look the same, but now you sort of see, you're like, oh, that's got that, and that's got this thing in it, and that's got a...
Yeah, it becomes more interesting, yeah.
Oh, I've enjoyed it thoroughly. It's been great fun to do, and as I say, I've learned an awful lot and developed my own knowledge considerably.